Welcome to Your Texas Land, a place where we deep dive into all things related to land in Texas. My name is Carly Barton. I'm your host. Today, I am joined by Hays County Commissioner for Precinct 4, Walt Smith. Today's episode, we are going to be talking through the upcoming Hays County road bond election and how that might impact landowners in this community. Thank you for joining us, Commissioner Smith.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, first off, I want to start, what is a road bond? What do you do with that, and why are we here talking about it?
Sure. Well, in Texas, and specifically in Hays County, the average taxpayer, whenever they pay their ad valorem taxes and those kind of things, a certain percentage of that or portion of that goes to repairing, expanding, and taking care of the roadways that are dedicated to the county. And those county roadways over time need what I would call large-scale maintenance or large-scale repairs. And given the population growth we have, at times expansion when needed. And so a road bond is actually the county going out to voters asking if they can borrow a certain amount of money to try to do those larger projects that they can't finance just on an annual basis. And so Hays County hasn't had a road bond since 2016. And we've reached a point with our population growth and other factors that we really have to address some of those concerns that we can't fund in our regular budget. Just like, if you have to do a major home repair out there, you may not be able to cash flow that with your paycheck every month. And so you go do a home equity loan or something like that. That's very similar in action.
So it's like capital improvements to Hays County.
Correct. And really, every commissioner has their own priorities. And here in Hays County, when we've done our master transportation plan and really looked at what the needs are, I really tried to outlay three priorities. And my biggest priority, of course, is health and public safety. And so really identifying those roadways that over time have proven that they're safety concerns, addressing some of those in a large scale. Trying to get as much, the second point would be, trying to get as much squeeze out of the orange as we can, right? Get as much mobility out of the roadways that we have, whether that's adding shoulders or turn lanes, those kind of things is kind of the second one. And then the third one is where we don't have roadways, but we know that we have the need for additional mobility, looking at any type of new infrastructure or a new roadway, so.
You talked about the rapid population growth of Hays County. What are the considerations you take into determining where those new roadways might need to go?
Well, it's interesting. There's two schools of thought, and I really was of a different school of thought whenever I first came into office. That if you built roadways, then lo and behold, you increase the population. And what we found in Hays County, especially since we did the census in 2020, was we didn't necessarily build a lot of new roadways prior to that. But guess what? We grew 54% in that 10-year period. And so folks are coming here, and now we have to address the population that's moving here, whether we build the roadways or not. And what it's really done is put a real strain on our current residents. I think a perfect example is the growth in the school district in Dripping Springs. I mean, where I have a house south of 150 on 12, and for me to go up 12 and turn left on 290 and get to the school, it's about 34 minutes to do that. Conversely, if I go south and hit a county road down there and then come around and hit another county road, it adds about 6 miles to the travel, but it's 14 minutes shorter by time. And situations like that have really put a strain on that county road system, because I'm not the only one who looks at a map and figures out, well, it might be a little bit farther, but it's a lot quicker. And we have thousands upon thousands of homes coming to Dripping Springs, whether we build that infrastructure or not. And so we have to prepare for that. And really the bond itself isn't about expansion. It's about relief for our current residents.
Absolutely. And so what is the kinds of projects that are covered in this road bond?
Sure. Well, like I said, the bond itself is a countywide bond. There's over 30 projects in it, and I can't really speak for the other three precincts, but I can speak for mine. And my precinct stretches from I-35 in Buda all the way to west of Dripping Springs. Prior to 2021, I actually had over half the county in my precinct because 10 years before that, there was no population in it. And now I have the fastest growing precinct in the fastest growing county in the nation. And so when we looked at those projects, we said, where do we really need to look at design and anticipation of where we have those residents right now and where we know those residents are traveling throughout the county. And we also wanted to look at, okay, well, 5 years from now, because we don't pass a bond every year, right? The last one was in 2016. So how do we set ourselves up as a county to have what we would consider a local match to try to get the Department of Transportation, TxDOT or Campo, which is our the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, which that brings our federal tax dollars back down to Hays County. How would we be in the best position to try to access some of those tax dollars that we as residents are paying to bring them back to Hays County? And that's why the projects that we've looked at are really immediate need projects, and those projects that we would need to have completed over the next 5 to 10 years. Transportation projects don't happen overnight. We in Hays County have made a real commitment to working with landowners. And so we, while municipalities and counties have the power of eminent domain, we tend not to use it. At least in my precinct, we try not to use it at all cost. I'm proud to say that in my precinct, I've been in office for 6.5 years. We've had exactly 3 eminent domain cases where the county has needed to file for eminent domain for some type of traffic infrastructure. And 2 out of those 3, the property owner actually requested eminent domain because we couldn't settle on a price. They understood the need for the project. They actually gave us possession and use of the property and said, go ahead and build your project. But we're going to have a independent group decide how much that property's worth. And so there's a realization out there amongst our residents that they're facing the same traffic that everybody else is. And so there's been I think there's an understanding there. The project specific to my precinct, in the Dripping Springs area and the Buda area, I would say are very different. We did a deep dive with all of our community partners, with our school districts, with our cities, with the state, and asked them, where do you see the biggest impact where our county roadways are having on your infrastructure? I can tell you in the Dripping Springs area, it's our schools. Anybody who has a kid in school in Dripping Springs understands the needs there. Yep. And so over the last 5 to 7 years, we've really looked at what projects would have the biggest impact at schools. And so I'll use the example, if you use the Sawyer Ranch, Darden Hill corridor. Sawyer Ranch and Darden Hill, by 2 years from now, will have 5,000 students a day on that corridor. Wow. And all the associated traffic with it. And so with that, in the bond, there are 2 projects that, like I said, there's over 30 projects in the bond. In each precinct, there's 3 to 4 projects that are actually paid for through their construction. The rest are design or right-of-way acquisition, purchasing the property for them or moving the utilities for them, which is by far on any project, the hardest thing that we have to do is move the utilities. But as an example, 2 of the projects that are for full construction are the roadway, Darden Hill Road between Sawyer Ranch Road and 1826. There is a new elementary school there. Yep. Sawyer Ranch has 2 elementary schools and connects to a 3rd already. So we have full construction of the roadway between Sawyer Ranch Road and 1826 on Darden Hill. If you're familiar with Sawyer Ranch Road, as part of the previous...
It's part of my commute, so
there
yes.
There you go. As part of the previous road bond, the county constructed their first ever multimodal path, which is it's a fancy name for a wide sidewalk that you can ride bikes on and those kind of things. And that currently runs from the entrance to Belterra on Sawyer Ranch all the way south past High Point. This bond would pay for the full design and construction to extend that all the way to Darden at Sawyer Ranch. So it would connect to the Cypress Springs Elementary that is there now, where the new roundabout is currently in place, and the proposed site for the new high school. So those two projects would have a direct impact in as far as design and property acquisition and utility relocation. Also included in the bond is a redesign and widening of Sawyer Ranch Road. Anybody who's dropped off their kid at Sycamore Elementary or Sycamore Middle knows the need for that. And so this gets us those projects completed and farther down the road on the expansion of Sawyer Ranch. And so that's one example of how we worked with the school districts. The other project specific to the Dripping Springs area is we're also looking at Darden Hill. They're at that intersection of Sawyer Ranch Road going west. And what does the future of that road look like as far as design, connecting all the way to 150? The end of Darden Hill is a real safety issue. If you've ever driven it, it's got multiple right angle turns at the end of it. And our law enforcement have clocked people driving over 70 miles an hour on that roadway.
Oh, wow.
A small 2-lane road. Not safe for that.
No.
And so there's an enforcement aspect there, but also there's just a roadway safety aspect that we have to address. We're looking at, we also have funds in there. Safety is a big concern for me on Fitzhugh Road. And we've, in the bond, we've included funding of $5 million to do immediate safety improvements to $3 million of it would go to immediate safety improvements on Fitzhugh Road, and then an additional $2 million to actually do outreach to the community and design on what would the ultimate configuration of Fitzhugh Road look like, because there are some very easily identifiable safety concerns there. Like a lot of roadways the county has, they weren't laid out on a map and drawn with a straight line, and so they're inherently old roadways where it may have been a property line, or it may have been where you could cross the creek.
Right.
And that's what dictated where the roadway went.
Yeah.
And so, how do we address those? That's what that additional $2 million is. But I will say on that project, one of the commitments from the county that's actually included in the bond is that we want to, preserve the rural characteristics of a rural roadway and really the community that surrounds that roadway. And so in all of our materials, it states very clearly that it won't be anything larger than a 2-lane roadway, 2 lanes of travel. The one exception of that will probably be some of the intersections where we have to have turn lanes for the intersections. But other than that, we want to maintain it as a 2-lane roadway. The biggest project in the Dripping Springs area that would probably provide the largest amount of relief is a Southwest connector, which that Southwest connector would stretch from the corner of 150 at Ranch Road 12, there south of town, west around the Calaterra development, and connect to 290 to the west. And if you look at the roadways that are being built or are already built in Dripping Springs over the last 5 to 10 years, really, I think everyone on earth understands that the bane of our existence when it comes to transportation is 290 and 12.
Right.
It's a state roadway. I can't dictate what happens there. The county can't. We can definitely give input, and we have. But I think anybody who lives in our area knows that as soon as that massive project is done at Circle Drive, at the Y in Austin, the new Y is going to be 12 and 290, and it's almost there right now. So how do you relieve traffic with that? The city has tried to address that with their new Roger Hanks Parkway that goes from 12 north down to 290 on the west side. There are some developments that the city has approved that would provide a connection from 290 to the east, kind of by HEB over there, to connect north and south onto 12. But really that southwest side of town is the one area where there's no access. You have to go through 12 and 290.
Right. And
this would provide that thoroughfare to have traffic go around the city and possibly alleviate some of that traffic on 290. And so we've been in a process for 3 years now, where we've done some public meetings. We've done different things to really address and get input from the public as far as what they would like to see in a roadway there. And the design for that is in this bond as well. Kind of in the Buda area, there's two major projects over there that fall in my precinct. One of them is the design for Old San Antonio Road, which if you ever turn off of 35.
Oh, yes.
Exactly. It runs parallel to I-35. Believe it or not, if you're on Main Street in Buda, one block off Main Street, it becomes a county road. And so it goes all the way into Travis County. Travis County has redone that roadway, and our portion of it is in fairly bad shape. And I inherited that portion of my precinct, and it's one that I really want to address.
And goes back to also planning around schools, because the new Buda Elementary is off of it as well. So.
Exactly, and there's a lot of things going on in the area, not necessarily residential development and not necessarily commercial, but what we're finding, just like a lot of our county roads, is folks are using it as a alternative thoroughfare, right? Yep. And so it was never, a lot of our roadways were never built to take 1,000 cars a day, 500 cars a day. And now they're saying, 3, 4, 10,000 cars a day. They're just not made for it. And so how do we address those concerns?
Oh, I used to use it to commute to Austin because I didn't want to go on I-35 or MoPac. 45 wasn't built at the time either, but I was living in Buda, so I'd take that old San Antonio road and go up to South First. So you can definitely see the change in the Hays County road system.
Well, and you just mentioned 45. The last major project in my precinct is the 45 gap. And so right now, if you drive on 45 or if you drive on 35 or 1626, you know that there is one piece of that roadway that doesn't connect. 45 from the west, dead ends into 1626, 45 from the east, dead ends into I-35. And currently the city of Buda, along with Hays County, is going through we've had an environmental clearing process for that roadway. There's been literally dozens of public meetings, 3 in the last year on 45, to gain public input from our citizens here in Hays County. And so we are actually looking in this bond to provide design money for what that roadway would look like now that we've more or less gotten to a point where we have what we would consider an established route. And so now that you have a route, you have to go in and figure out what you don't know about those proproperties and actually start designing a roadway. So
lots of things that go into each of these decisions.
Exactly.
Well, I think something really interesting that you mentioned and talked about with these projects is that that we have some projects in this road bond are for construction where there will actually be building the roads or building the mobility pathways and things like that, versus the planning and design aspects of projects down the road. On those planning and design projects, would they be covered for construction in this road bond, or how would that affect those projects, and how would they be funded in the future?
So a couple of different ways. I made the analogy of your household budget, right? There are certain things that you can pay for annually in your household budget. The bond really gives us the opportunity to fast forward some of those. For example, the safety and mobility, the immediate safety and mobility needs that we have on Fitzhugh Road, that's about $3 million. And for us to do that right now, I have budgeted in the county budget about $1 million a year for the next 3 years. So I'm going to have to save that money for 3 years, and then we'll be able to go in and do those safety improvements. If the bond passes, then we can actually immediately start doing those safety improvements. And whenever I say immediately, we would hope to have them implemented by the end of next year. Yeah. And so it would fast forward that project by about 3 years. In the bond, there are 3 things that in my precinct that would be for immediate construction. The first would be that multi-use path on Sawyer Ranch Road.
That's definitely needed. I saw someone running on the shoulder of the road this morning when I was driving to work. So,
what's just as an aside, what's interesting is whenever the path that's there now, when it was being constructed, we go out for bid on it and those kind of things. And I got a call from the contractor about 3 weeks in, and he said, we're going to have to make an adjustment to the process. And I was like, well, what do you mean? I was worried that, I was worried that it was going to cost a lot more money. There was, a problem with the design, something like that. He goes, we have to go out and rent bullards or blockades. And I said, well, what's going on? He said, well, as we pour the individual sections of the sidewalk, we have people trying to ride their bikes and run on it as we're pouring it. So we have to block it off. And I was like, well, I was a little bit worried about people using it. I'm not as worried now. And on the day that we opened it, went out there and did a little ribbon cutting. We were there for 45 minutes. And during that ribbon cutting, we had 84 people go in front of us as we were doing it the day it opened. So I thought, wow, this is really going to be used well. And so it worked. But the construction of Darden Hill from Sawyer Ranch Road to 1626 will be one of the first things we do as well. It has full construction funding because we do anticipate, like I said, 5,000 students on that roadway. Yeah. And just to show the impact that some of these projects can have, I don't have it with me, but there's a phenomenal video that the county has where any person who used that intersection prior to the construction of that roundabout, they would understand this. But we have aerial footage, drone footage of that intersection while it was a 3-way stop. And at drop off in the morning for school and at pickup in the evening. And the traffic at that intersection backed up from that intersection all the way to 1626. Yeah. And it shows it. We have drone footage from the intersection after the completion of that roundabout. And instead of sitting in a 2.5 mile lane of traffic, the average car waits 14 seconds at that intersection. Now, I mean, it is completely different. And so we want to complete that roadway because we know that'll have one of the largest impacts that it would have. And then the last one is anybody that goes north on 12 towards Dripping Springs from the Wimberley area, or south on 12 towards that area, understands the intersection of 12 and there's a new light there. There's another development that we know of that is going in there that will add another, over 1,000 homes in that area. That's already, just going through, there's multiple things going through approval processes with the city, which we don't control, but we have to deal with the traffic for it. And so part of the 2016 road bond was the redevelopment of that intersection. That was when the design was done and those kind of things. And this bond actually pays for the construction. How those projects that are in design get paid for, most of the projects that we're looking at would eventually be state projects, right? A lot of them. What we like to do is pay for our county projects just like we would, your regular bills on your home, right? You know that you're going to have an electric bill every month, but every once in a while you're going to have to buy a new refrigerator. And so you save for those refrigerators and you figure you have to buy a refrigerator every 10 years or so. So we're saving in our budgets to try to address those that are county road specific, right? And we have to pay for those in our budget. What the bond gives us the ability to do is compete very well at the state based on a statewide basis and on a federal basis to say, look, this is a needed project. we know that it impacts a state roadway or that the state is interested in this, the state may say, yeah, we think it's an important project, but we're going to fund it in 2050. We're going to fund it 25 years from now.
Yeah.
What we can do is walk in and say, we think it's an important project that's needed today. Guess what? We are going to do the utility relocation and the design and those kind of things. And then they look at that project and say, there's a commitment on behalf of the local entity. They've already paid 20% of the cost. Maybe we can step in and pay for the construction, or maybe we can cost share the construction. And so it really puts us, especially with our population, between the census and us being willing to step up and pay for a portion of that, whether it be design or whether it be right-of-way acquisition. It puts us at a strong competitive advantage over other communities who aren't willing to address those things.
Yeah, because, then the state looks at Hays County and says, oh, they're doing their homework, they're committed, they really want this project. And then, there's only so many dollars that the state or federal government have to pour back in. So it's a good strategy.
As a taxpayer, it puts my mind at ease, because at the end of the day, I know that those federal and state tax dollars that I'm paying, there's a much better chance of those coming back and being spent where I live.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to pay for roadways in Houston or in Ohio. I want to pay for roadways in Hays County. And if Hays County is willing to make a commitment, then we get a lot more of that money back.
Yeah. So now I want to talk a little bit, and we can divide up your answer. But first, I'd like to talk to a little bit about what can landowners expect on the construction projects. And you can speak specifically to the ones in your precinct. What should they expect for a timeline and things like that? Sure.
So each one of these projects has a different timeline, right? One may have all the right-of-way it needs and all the utility relocation, and the design's already done, right? We've got one project, that 120150, construction on it would, if the bond passes, would start within 6 to 8 months, right? Because the county owns the property, there's no utilities, they've all been moved or they're in the process of being moved, and this is just for literally putting the concrete on the ground, like the hard construction, right?
Right.
If you look at Sawyer Ranch and Darden Hill, some of that property has been acquired, some of the utilities have been relocated, and so we will start the process of all of those landowners should have been, because we were anticipating that we were going to do these projects, whether or not we have a bond or not, we've already done outreach to the vast, I think, every one of those property owners. Mm-hmm. So they already have a contact with the county. If they don't know who to talk to, they can always reach out to my office, and we can get them in contact with the teams that we have working on those. But the property owners should expect that they'll get a contact from somebody either with or representing the county, and we'll start the process of saying, okay, first off, before anything else, we're going to ask you for a right of entry to say, okay, we're trying to design a roadway, but we want to sit down and meet with you. We want you to tell us what's there and what's not there, what you want to preserve, what you have a concern about, or, I have a concern that if you cross at this point, it might flood this one field that I use for this, or, really get a feel from the property owner what their concerns are and how we can best address those. Mm-hmm. Because engineers do a really good job of drawing a line on a piece of paper, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, especially in our portion of the county, geography dictates everything.
Right.
And so an engineer will always draw a straight line, and then you go out there and you figure out that, you know what, you really can't have a straight line. And I think one of the things that's interesting in the design and most of the stuff we do is we try to keep a rural character in it, in Western Hays County. Other areas don't do that, but we try to have our traffic facilities or our mobility facilities really fit the land, not make the land fit what we're building. And so that creates some additional issues for us. But at the end of the day, I think it gives us a better product. And I think the community likes it a lot more. Yeah. And again, people move here for culture and community. And if we can, even in a roadway, if we can try to preserve that, then that's what we try to do. Once those initial conversations are had with those property owners, Then we will move into an acquisition phase after the design is done. And, their property owners go out and find great advocates like Brian Gresham that we work with across the table every day. And we sit down and talk about the brass tacks about, of the value of properties and how we can go about acquiring them in a way where the property owner feels like they got a fair shake, and the county feels like they're well representing the other taxpayers in the county. Because at the end of the day, I think the biggest, I grew up on a ranch in Central Texas, and twice since I've been alive, we've gone through eminent domain proceedings on my ranch with pipelines. And at the end of the day, I always wanted to feel like I got the value of my property, but I also wanted to feel like I was respected and I didn't get run over. And but I also was a taxpayer. So whenever the county expanded the roadway across my neighbor's property, I wanted to make sure that my tax dollars were being spent right.
Please don't spend too much, but
exactly. It needs to be fair, but don't overpay. And so there's a state legislative process that we go through that's pretty clear on how we do that to protect taxpayers and to protect property owners. And so there's a very, like I said, state regulated process that we move forward on that. And then we look at trying to secure the construction funds for this project. So
yeah. And on the design projects, if a landowner's property, it could be potentially impacted by these future expansions or new roads. On the design side of these projects, what can a landowner do, and what can they how can they help the county, but also what should they be doing to make sure that their rights or their opinions are being considered in these projects?
Sure. So the state did a great thing, I think a great thing a number of years ago, and they passed a property owner's bill of rights. And I would, number one, familiarize myself with that. It's a one-page document. It's in statute. If you type in the property owner's bill of rights, Texas, it pops up, and it's very clear on what, as a property owner, you should expect in a situation like that. And it also gives some good points that you probably haven't thought of. I know I wouldn't have thought of all the points in there as a property owner. I wish I had that whenever I was on the property owner side of the negotiations I was in. But the other thing I would say is know your property and understand the intricacies of your property that someone who is looking at building a project may not understand. And I say that, I'll use an example. One of the things we look at, of course, is the floodplain. And we say, okay, well, if we build a roadway here, how will that impact the floodplain? What will that do? And a floodplain map, we'll use FEMA data, we'll use county data. Hays County has actually done additional studies within the county that provide better information than FEMA does. And really, what I think the one thing that landowners don't look at, that I wish they did, because we certainly look at it, is not only the impact that a new facility would have on their property, but if that new facility crosses you and goes into your neighbor and the neighbor, what impact does that have when it crosses their property that will change the impact on me? So in other words, if they have to build up the roadway on your neighbor, does that bring additional water onto your property? Does that, those things that you might not think about, I would definitely look at that. There's, like I said, a statutory process. If you don't understand that process, or if you look through it and you say, this is, above my understanding of how this works, I'm never going to rip into my car these days and fix it. Go out and find somebody that knows how to fix your car, right? And so there are great law firms and consultants and other things, folks that are here that work on cars every day, right? You don't want somebody that this is their first rodeo if you do that. And so I would encourage them to do their due diligence and do their homework and really find an advocate on their behalf. Because like I said, since it is a statutory process, we kind of know once we move into those processes what the end will be. We just what the end result will be, as far as, there will be a facility there, but the process to get there can be very different. One property owner may say, look, I've known about this road for 30 years. And why haven't you built it yet? Yeah. I need it for,
Please,
I wish you, and we have another property owner may say, well, one of the issues we have to face in Hays County is, again, these projects take a long time, right? I use the example of 150 and 12. That was first conceptualized in 2010. It was in a master transportation plan in 2010, 2012, funded for design in 2016. Now we're talking about construction. It's a 15, 16-year project. And so we've had such an influx of growth here that a lot of projects we're looking at may have had public outreach and design and, public meetings and those kind of things.
Right.
And
Years ago, right?
Yeah. Right? And now we're actually going to construction. And so you may have moved here 4 years ago and never heard of it.
Right.
And so, but there was a 6-year process to develop that project. And so really trying to familiarize yourself with those individual projects, I think, would be helpful. But we do, and again, this is one thing I'll say, every commissioner works differently. I made a commitment because I had gone through an eminent domain process, or, I'd been impacted by infrastructure, that I would never have a public meeting and talk about a roadway where we hadn't at least done or offered outreach to the property owners that would be impacted.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of entities, public entities, don't do that.
Right.
I mean, I well remember walking out on my property and there being 30 guys out there surveying it and asking, what are you doing? That will never happen in my precinct. Or at least for a county project, that won't ever happen.
Yeah.
I can't speak for the state or the cities, but I can talk on behalf of the county. And so we try to do a really good job of engaging those property owners so they don't read in the newspaper that, hey, there's a roadway that could possibly impact my property. And so we try to do that on the front end. So expect those phone calls and expect outreach from the county.
Yeah.
But then try to do some due diligence and say, you know what, when they do call, here's what my concerns are. And maybe not just concerns on my property, but here's concerns that I have on the property next to me and how it's going to impact me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in terms of the road bond itself, we've got lots of projects in the design or in the construction phase, but what is this going, I live in Hays County, I'm a taxpayer here. So what's it going to cost me? And what is that impact to my home budget?
Sure. So the impact of the bond itself would be 2 cents per $100 of valuation on property taxes. A lot of people don't realize this, but whenever they get that tax bill from Hays County once a year, you write one check for your property taxes, right?
Yep.
On my tax bill, there's a dozen taxing entities on there. And so generally in the county, about 64 to 68% of that check goes to whatever school district you're in.
Right.
Right. And then off the top of that, like, for example, where I live, I have 2 emergency service districts. Most people, I don't, because I live in the ETJ, I don't live in a city limits. Most people have a city tax that's on there. Generally, the county is the third or fourth as far as overall tax that you pay. A lot of people have a special utility district or a MUD or a SUD or a WCID, and that is your second, right behind the school district, and then the county. Average in the county, I'm going to be just off a little bit. Last year, I think we were right at just under $1,100 a year on average property taxes. And at 2 cents per $100 valuation right now, your overall county taxes are at 35 cents. And so it'd be a slight increase from that. What I would tell you is up until this year, the county's tax rate was just over 30 cents per $100 valuation. And to put that in perspective, of the 254 counties in the state, we were tied for about 25th lowest in the state.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, I would love to say we were 25th lowest, but there's a lot that tie in there, you know.
Right.
So we aren't exactly 25th, but we were right at tied for 25th, which is pretty substantial given the growth that we've had.
Yeah.
And when you pay your county taxes, and that's total taxes you pay to the county, right? There's actually two lines in there. One of those is your general ad valorem taxes, and that was for Hays County. That was about 28 cents, and 2 cents of that was directly for road and bridge. And there's a line on your tax bill that says county road and bridge. And so, in order to keep the tax rate low, for a number of years, the county commissioners in Hays County, they cut into road and bridge, and they cut other things, and really paid for everything in the county off of new growths, new residents that move in. When a new resident moves in, or if you take a piece of property and decide, hey, I'm going to build a house on it, for the county to realize the value, it usually takes about 36 months from the time that, hey, I'm going to build a house here to it's a house that's built and they're paying the taxes on a new house, right? But those people are living here and they're driving on our roads and they're using our emergency service districts, and they want an ambulance to show up if they get hurt, or if it's that house catches on fire, they want the fire department to show up. And so we as regular residents have to supplement that until they're on the tax rolls. And so the increase that has occurred over the last year in our county taxes, I know I'm talking a lot of numbers here.
That's okay.
But about 64% of the money that we take in immediately goes of every dollar, 64 cents or thereabouts, immediately goes into our judicial and our law enforcement in Hays County. Yeah. And then we've got about 680 unfunded mandates from the state where the state says, this is what you have to do. Y'all figure out how to pay for it. So that's where the rest of it comes from. And so this year, our tax rate is 35 cents. Again, like I said, it'll still be a bottom 30 in the state. Right. But we increased that road and bridge percentage up to it's between 4 and 5 cents of that will go into road and bridge. Okay. And then within our budget, we're in the middle of collective bargaining with our law enforcement officers. And to maintain our law enforcement officers, we've also set aside about $5 million in funding specifically for changes in salaries and those kind of things for law enforcement. So that's where that money went. And so, again, it's us trying to save more in our regular budget to address these issues, knowing that if we get this bond, we'll be able to, not just paint the house, but we're gonna be able to replace some windows and those kind of things where we need it. Yeah,
I did a little bit of math on the road bond. So on that 2 cents per $100 home valuation, if you have about a house valued at about $400,000, that's $80 of increase in your property taxes over the year, so about $7 a month. So
correct.
Correct. Not too bad.
Not too
considering
bad.
We don't have any toll roads down in Hays County yet,
right.
So you could pay that in one day up in Austin. So.
Exactly, and we the education materials that have been put out with the bond become a contract with the voters, right? And so part of that education material takes what the average home value is in the county, and that it states, this is what the average increase would be, and again, less than $10 a month. I was shooting for less than $8, and we got there. And so it's for the projects that would be delivered, the value, overall value, I think is a very good deal for taxpayers. None of us like paying more taxes. I can tell you that. I'll use as an example, where I live, thankfully there's statewide, there's a cap on how much your property taxes can grow, actual dollars every year, right? I've hit that every year in my home. I moved here in 2012, and I've hit that every year that I've lived here. And thankfully the state has that cap. this is the first time the county, since I've been here, we passed a Parks and Open Space bond in 2020, and we were able to do that bond under our current tax rate without having to talk about any type of increase whatsoever. We ate that with our house budget, right? And this one we're not able to do that, but we've been very fortunate that we've been able to do that. One of the things that I would like to mention is that if the county doesn't have to do this, but we have our homestead exemption in the county that's capped by the state. But the other thing that Hays County does is we have a cap on the elderly and veterans. So if you are 65 or older, we freeze your tax rate. When you hit 65. So the state mandates what your appraisal is,
right?
But we set the tax rate. And so we as the county have chosen that once our citizens hit 65, that their the rate will be frozen. It'll never be higher. Now, if the tax rate drops, they can take advantage of the tax rate drop, which we've done. Actually, in the last 14 years, we've dropped the tax rate every year except this year. It's the first time in 14 years. So if I was able to drop my overall, my expenses each year, I would have been pretty happy with it. But dropping a tax rate every year has been how we've tried to level the playing field for our current residents, and actually get the most that we could out of those new residents that are committing to move here.
Yeah. First off, we've talked a lot about the projects in your precinct. There are many projects for the rest of Hays County. What is the best way to get information about what projects are planned and kind of a little bit more details on each of those?
Sure. So there's educational materials that are available on the Hays County website, and those education materials actually go through every individual project in the county. It'll tell you what the overall cost for each one is individually, but more importantly, it tells you what we believe or what we anticipate to be like what an average section of that roadway will look like. So if you're thinking, oh, well, there might be a project here, are they going to put 2 lanes here? Are they going to rebuild this intersection? Or, is it going to be 4 lanes? Is it going to have a median? Is it not? What's it look like? The other thing is that it tells you really the purpose behind it. Is this a safety project? That tells you that we probably identified that there's been wrecks there or there needs to be additional shoulders. Is it a new construction project? And then also within that documentation for each individual project, it will tell you what the bond would pay for. So you can look at a project like Garden Hill, at that section, and on that informational material, it will say, oh, we don't have right-of-way purchased, we don't have utilities done, but all of the design is complete. And so that tells you there's not an immediate timeline on there, but what it tells you is, okay, well, that is probably farther down the road than the one where we don't have any design and we haven't, we've done some public meetings. And so it really gives you more of a sense on where those projects are. And you can anticipate, is this, do I need to be concerned about this project in the next 6 months? Or do I need to be concerned about this project 6 years from now?
Right.
And if I'm looking to do something with my property, or if I am going to, the example I use, and I had a conversation 2 weeks ago with a property owner, if the biggest concern he had is, okay, well, this project is coming. I know it's coming. I need to rebuild my fence. If I'm going to have to rebuild my fence and I do it once every 20 years, is this a 20-year project or is this a 5-year project?
Right.
And my answer is somewhere in between, right? Yeah. But he's looking at it thinking, okay, I'm going to do these improvements to my property. How should I address that? And so those are generally the questions I get on the front end, and that might help give you a little bit better sense of the answers to that.
Yeah. And this road bond is voted on by the Hays County residents. So tell us a little bit about Election Day, early voting, and things like that.
Sure. So, of course, Election Day is always the first Tuesday in November. And in Hays County, we're a little bit different than a lot of counties in the state. So if you're a registered voter in Hays County, you can vote anywhere and any of our locations are open to you. And so if you're driving through San Marcos or you're driving through Dripping or Wimberley and you see a sign that says voting location, you can pull in and vote right there. It doesn't matter where you live. If you live in that community, early voting starts 2 weeks before Election Day. And I think you had that day.
Yeah, October 21st.
October 21st. There are polling locations listed on the county website. Here in the Dripping Springs area, the early polling locations are at Ranch Park and Patriots Hall. There's, I think, the Driftwood Community Center, maybe one as well.
Yeah, that's where I voted the last time.
Yeah. But we have, I want to say like 40 polling locations for Election Day, and then multiple polling locations that are early voting. And so those are all listed on the county website, the county elections website. And so I would encourage you to just take a second, look and see where you can vote. I will tell you on Election Day, polling times are 7 to 7. Generally, the week before the election, they're 7 to 7. And that first week of early voting, they're a little bit condensed. I think it's like maybe 8 to 5 or 8 to 6. And so I would look at those. I'm not sure on the actual times, but find a location that's closest to you. Do a little bit of due diligence and see those projects that are where you live or that might impact you. Part of that information, if you look it up online, is an overall map of the county that actually you have it printed out right here that shows all the projects in the county. And so you can take a look at that and say, you know what, this would impact me, or this would really help my neighborhood. And so I would encourage you to look at that and ask questions. Call your elected officials, call the county. We're here to help, and we're here to try to educate as many people as possible. And I will tell you, like I said, I'm much more familiar with the projects in my precinct, but if I don't know an answer, I'm a phone call away from it. So we can always get somebody to get the information that you're requesting back to you.
Well, great. Well, I think that's a wrap for today's episode of Your Texas Land. We enjoyed so much about hearing about the Hays County Road Bond. Thank you, Commissioner Smith, for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Until next time, keep being an advocate for Texas land. Thanks for listening.